Good evening, I'm Chris Glover. Tonight, Ontario is putting the brakes on any further reopening.
We are preparing aggressively for the fall. I am sorry to say I think it's going to be a difficult fall and winter.
The province reveals new vaccine policies for high-risk settings amid a fourth wave of COVID-19. Plus,
I've got some really big shoes to fill in Peter Kent.
We've hit the ground running and we're saying hello to everyone in the morning.
At least 5 GTA incumbent MPs are not running in this federal election. We take a closer look at those ridings and the candidates vying to take their place. And
the recovery starts with us. It starts with us as locals when we start to re-engage with our own city and think about those things maybe we haven't done before.
A recovery campaign kicks off to boost tourism as the city tries to help businesses that were hardest hit in the pandemic. But first, we want to update you on some good news in the city tonight. A 12-year-old girl missing since Monday night has been found. Dan Takama is live near Victoria Park and Dawes Road, where the police had set up their command center. And Dan, a happy end to this one. What is the latest?
Absolutely, Chris. It is good news. Tanaya Earl has been found. Now, the 12-year-old had been missing for over 30 hours. That's since around 1:30 a.m. Monday night. She has autism and ADHD, and police say they were concerned for her safety. They searched the area here at Taylor Creek Park throughout the day, and then just before 4 p.m. said that she had been located a short distance away. Here's a bit of what police had to say.
It's a really big relief, especially when dealing with people that are vulnerable. She was talking with officers. I was led to believe from those officers with her that she was in good spirits and that she indicated that she was hungry and would like something to eat.
Hungry and would like something to eat. Now, Chris, police tell me that they believe Tanaya spent most of the night in and around this park area. This is a good ending for her and her family and for the community members who came out and helped police with the search. Chris.
Such a big community effort. Nice to see this happy ending. Thanks so much, Dan. Now to the latest on the pandemic, and Ontario is rolling out a new policy designed to increase vaccination rates in high-risk settings without making vaccines fully mandatory. The rule is being added for healthcare settings as well as colleges and universities. The message is get a vaccine or take rapid tests. That's just one of the changes announced today by the Chief Medical Officer. Lorenda Redekop has all those details.
We are preparing aggressively for the fall. I am sorry to say I think it's going to be a difficult fall and winter.
An ominous note from the chief medical officer. He says given the rise of the Delta variant, with vaccinations slowing, he called the Premier and told him changes were needed immediately.
We have to re-bolster our efforts to immunize Ontarians. It was unexpected to have such a sudden drop-off.
So as of September 7th, for healthcare settings, home care and ambulance services, staff must either be vaccinated, provide a medical exemption, or take a course on vaccinations. Anyone not vaccinated will have to do frequent rapid testing, at least once a week. This will also be in place for colleges and universities. This is already the policy at long-term care homes. Moore says they're finalizing a policy for schools and childcare centers. It would add a requirement to disclose vaccination status, with rapid testing for unvaccinated staff. The opposition parties don't feel it goes far enough.
No unvaccinated person should be providing health care to our most vulnerable. No unvaccinated person should be in a classroom with our kids.
Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca said Doug Ford is pandering to anti-vaxxers and failing to deliver mandatory vaccines for education workers. This ICU doctor tweeted that all that is mandated is an education session for the unvaccinated and rapid testing paid for by the government. But one member of the science advisory table says it will up the vaccination rate and keep people safe.
The point here is to find a pragmatic solution that brings the risk down for everybody to infect others. And that's what we're doing with the combination of either be vaccinated or get tested.
This as today, COVID-19 hospitalizations jumped up 55 to 163, with 127 people in ICU, 78 of them on a ventilator. Dr. Moore says of the few fully vaccinated people testing positive or becoming ill, They're commonly older with health conditions. That's why third dose booster doses will be offered for residents in long-term care and high-risk retirement homes, plus those with high-risk health conditions, including cancer patients and transplant recipients. One more change, as of tomorrow, the age limit is expanding for the vaccines, not just for those 12 and up, but also including those turning 12 this year. Lorenda Redicop, CBC News, Toronto.
And late news this afternoon from Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment saying anyone entering most of its sports venues will soon have to prove their vaccination status. All employees, event staff, and guests will be required to provide proof of vaccination or a negative COVID-19 test result to gain access to their arenas, stadiums, and restaurants by mid-September. That includes Scotiabank Arena, BMO Field, and Ricoh Coliseum. MLSC says more details will be released in the coming weeks. In Mississauga, more than 5,000 city employees may soon be required to get vaccinated for COVID-19 or face regular testing.
We're a little bit limited in how we could implement it, and we have to be very careful because of course it's a very complex issue, but we do have to give people options because it is their right to refuse the vaccine, but that would be in combination with education and rapid testing as well.
And Mayor Bonnie Crombie went on to say that Mississauga is among other GTA cities mulling over the idea of making vaccines mandatory for staff. And the leader of Ontario's Liberal Party is calling on the province to mandate vaccines among MPPs.
This cannot be one of those, do as I say, not as I do moments in Ontario after everything that we've gone through over the last about 18 months. The staff who work for MPPs or work for cabinet ministers, they all deserve to be safe too.
Stephen Del Duca there saying clear protocols should be in place for MPPs who are unvaccinated. He adds all Ontario Liberal MPPs have been double vaccinated, and he's concerned about Conservative MPPs who have chosen not to disclose their vaccination status. Ontario's spike in COVID-19 cases declined today. The province saw more than 500 new cases each day for the past 5 days, but today's figures show a drop. 348 cases were logged today. 10 more deaths were reported as well, though the province says 6 of those deaths were from 2 months ago and logged today only because of a data cleanup. The 7-day rolling average of cases now sits at 473. Now to another fallout of the pandemic, surgical backlogs caused by a strained medical system. In Ontario, oncologists are finding cancer patients are being diagnosed late. They say that's translating into more invasive treatment and worse outcomes. Angelina King has that story.
Say hi. Hi, Rosie. A happy Joyce Cohoot at Disneyland on a family vacation, healthy. That was 2 years ago. Now,
she's collateral damage of COVID.
Her daughter Kathleen Morley says her mom's yearly CT scan was delayed a year due to the pandemic. Doctors had been keeping an eye on a small benign nodule. It ended up turning into stage 4 lung cancer, a terminal diagnosis.
Almost crushed my family. And it's hard. It's really, really hard.
Instead of what would have likely been one surgery, she's now enduring radiation and chemotherapy, which recently put her in the ICU in Ottawa.
Bigger tumors, delays in getting to diagnosis, requiring more aggressive treatment. There's no doubt about it.
This surgical oncologist says whether it be missed screenings, not being seen in person, or system delays, cancer has been going undetected because of the pandemic. Doctors say that's leading to worse outcomes.
When you have more advanced disease, not only do you need to often undergo more extensive cancer treatment, so combinations of surgery, radiation, and drug therapy, also the chances of success start to drop.
Doctors say that means more stress and cost on an already strained healthcare system. The pandemic has left an estimated backlog of 15.9 million surgeries in Ontario alone. Hospitals are catching up. Ontario Health says between March of last year and this July, there's been a 94% increase in surgeries that treat non-life-threatening cancer. And the province recently announced more than $300 million to complete 67,000 more surgeries than otherwise possible, and do 135,000 more hours of diagnostic imaging. But doctors say it's not just about money. The system needs people too.
We have an entire healthcare workforce that's been beat up over the pandemic.
Plus, there's an unknown backlog. Iskander says there's still a large number of undiagnosed people with cancer in Ontario. His message?
You need to come in, and the sooner you come in, the better. The earlier we can biopsy, the earlier we can image. We're open for business. It's safe to come in.
Doctors say if you've missed a screening or feel like something is off, it's important to see a physician as soon as possible. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
We are now officially in day 3 of the federal election campaign. Once again, we saw some of the federal leaders spend time right here in the GTA. Tons of interesting races to watch, but in at least 5 ridings, incumbents, some of whom have held their seats for many years, are not running this time. Farah Morelli takes a closer look.
I will implement a month-long GST holiday.
From downtown Toronto.
It's so good to be back here in Markham.
To Markham.
It's an incredibly diverse community.
To Regent Park. 3 of the federal leaders started their day campaigning in the vote-rich GTA, a region where this year some high-profile names won't be running. There are at least 5 ridings where the incumbents aren't running again. Toronto's Spadina-Fort York, the riding of Thornhill, to the west, Mississauga-Malton and Mississauga-Streetsville, as well as Brampton Centre to the north, formerly a Liberal seat before the MP was removed from caucus. Conservative MP Peter Kent has held the Thornhill riding since 2008, but isn't running again. Longtime Conservative strategist Melissa Landsman is hoping to keep the riding blue.
We're putting all of those Conservative strategies into practice, and I've got some really, really big shoes to fill in Peter Kent.
Shoes that will be marching alongside her on her campaign.
She's an entrepreneur, and she's a terrific, as you know, communicator. So it's time for generational change.
We can win elections.
Another high-profile incumbent not running again, Adam Vaughan, first elected in 2014.
We're out, knocking on doors some more.
The Liberals have tapped entrepreneur Kevin Vaughan in hopes of holding on to that seat.
This is one of the most diverse communities in the world. It's so vibrant. It's also very vertical. And so we've hit the ground running, and we're saying hello to everyone in the morning. We're working right through the day, and then we're knocking on doors in the evening when there are more people at home.
With those high-profile incumbents no longer running, the question is, how much does name recognition truly matter versus party affiliation?
I'm kind of weighing my options, and yeah, I feel like maybe it'll be for a party at this point.
I usually vote for a candidate based on what they are saying.
Being a Canadian citizen of Jamaican background, traditionally, people from the Caribbean vote Liberal.
So I don't know if it's just party, but I try to listen about what they talk about.
Whether it be party or candidate or both, that will be up to voters when they head to the polls in 34 days. Farah Morelli, CBC News, Toronto.
Party, candidate, or maybe issue. And it's time for GTA voters to weigh in. We're asking you what issues matter to you in this federal election so we can take your concerns right to the candidates and get their responses. Head to cbc.ca/Toronto to fill out the online form. Colette Kennedy joining me now. And Colette, with all those campaigners and volunteers out doing door knocking tonight, what kind of weather are they in store for?
Yeah, it gets a little trickier here, Chris, because those dew points are coming up again.
Nicer than a December election campaign, I would think, for those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing they're just dealing with, maybe you work up a sweat a little bit easier because things are just so moist right now, and we're finding that humidity going up. So our temperatures, those are going to be climbing too as we head towards the end of this week and towards the weekend. For now, looking at 27 degrees in Toronto, which, by the way, the daytime high, but it's the humidity that we factored in, and we're finding these humidex values kind of in those mid-30s in general, but they'll be creeping up towards 40. So that'll put a sweat on you pretty quickly. And add to that some of this is just some tropical moisture with everything that's happening with the tropics, and then seeing some of these systems pushing up towards us, or at least getting close. So seeing just a few pop-up kind of afternoon showers, a few light thunderstorms in here. The heavier stuff the more potent stuff, is still stateside. But isolated showers coming back into the forecast tomorrow towards the afternoon hours. A few of those. That's going to be an enhanced risk, though, back into southwestern Ontario. Overnight tonight, it's mostly just some cloud cover we're dealing with. 20 degrees. 28 for tomorrow, but there's that Humidex just creeping up there, Chris.
My, oh my, a good day to stay inside if you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thanks, Colette. For local tourism, Destination Toronto is trying to get you to enjoy the city like a visitor would. The Never Have I Ever TO campaign has been in the works since before the pandemic, actually, but its creators say it is needed now more than ever. Jessica Ng has that story.
Never have I ever gone 356 meters up the CN Tower and walked around outside.
Mayor John Tory completes the Edge Walk on Toronto's iconic observation tower.
We want everybody to find something to do in their city.
It's part of a $4 million campaign called Never Have I Ever TO.
The recovery starts with us. It starts with us as locals when we start to re-engage with our own city and think about those things maybe we haven't done before.
Like try a different type of food, explore a neighborhood outside of your normal travels, or check out a business you've been eyeing.
If you watch a resident and a visitor walk down the street, the resident is thinking about their next meeting and where they need to go. And a visitor walks with their heads up. And they're walking a little bit slower because they're taking it in.
A concept familiar to the Foodies group. They're behind events like Dîner en Blanc and Graffiti Alley, pop-ups and culinary tours.
Toronto's such a big city, but it was very common for people to work in one area and then reside in another and really kind of support those two neighborhoods and not get out and discover the city.
This food truck is everything that summer represents.
Now, Hellman is starting to coordinate events for fall, including the first ever Attractions Week in October. Hellman says places like Ripley's and the CN Tower have been among the hardest hit by the pandemic.
Drastic revenue losses, big layoffs of staff. So, it was really, really, really tough. And now, in gearing back up, they're kind of excited to get going.
It'll be well into 2022 before we see any significant size and level of meetings and conventions return.
Destination Toronto is also launching My Toronto Pass, which lists special promotions for attractions and restaurants. It's free for businesses to join, hoping to help them reopen after the last year and a half. But a key for the tourism industry's recovery will be flights and more people coming into the city. Billy Bishop Airport is preparing to reopen for domestic flights September 8th and for U.S. destinations on September 17th.
It's only blue skies ahead for us, but certainly we had a lot of clouds on the horizon over the last 17 months, and we're looking forward to some good news and some good times.
And knocking a few spots off your Toronto bucket list. Jessica Ng, CBC News, Toronto.
All right, now to some news many motorists will not want to hear. A downtown stretch of Queen Street will be closed for, get this, up to 5 years for the construction of a new subway station.
That is going to require, unfortunately, about 4.5 years of closure of a short section of Queen, but a significant one. We'll maintain access for pedestrians at all times. Cyclists, we're going to develop a plan for them to go off-route. We have cars are diverted, and streetcars as well will be diverted.
A significant section, no kidding. The station is part of the Ontario line and is being built at Yonge and Queen. So this means that between Bay and Victoria Street, Queen will be closed. Some people downtown today said it'll be worth it in the long run.
Great that the Ontario line is finally getting built. It's something the city much really needs. And sometimes, yeah, you have to have closures that could last a number of years, but it'll be worth it in the end.
We heal up from COVID and everyone gets back onto it, it's going to be just as congested, and I think we might need some more stops around here.
Metrolink says for streetcar riders, they estimate it'll add another 5 minutes of travel time across this area, and construction is set to start in early 2023. Now that the Taliban has taken control of Afghanistan, its leadership is trying to reassure the population and a skeptical world. An English interpreter could be heard translating the Taliban's first news conference since its fighters seized Kabul on Sunday.
We are assuring the safety of all those who have worked with the United States and allied forces. Women will be afforded all their rights.
The capital appeared quiet today as insurgent soldiers patrolled the streets. Many residents stayed at home, and there are reports the Taliban is looking for those who it sees as enemies, and that would include journalists. Meanwhile, U.S. troops continue to guard Kabul International Airport as military evacuation planes fly diplomats and civilians out of the country. In Brussels, EU officials met to discuss a plan to relocate Afghan staff and their families. Okay, so we want to dig a little deeper now into how we got to this point in Afghanistan and where things may go from here. My next guest is an Afghan war veteran who served with the Canadian Forces starting in 2008 and spent a second deployment in Kabul starting in 2011 to train the Afghan National Army. David Panepinto is joining me now from Coburg. David, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
Okay, so I think the stunning thing for a lot of us is just how quickly Afghanistan fell to the Taliban after the U.S. left. Given your knowledge of the region and tensions in the country, what did you make of how quickly this all happened?
Yeah, this is very shocking to myself. I've been bouncing a lot of ideas off fellow veterans. All of us are in a similar situation. Just utter shock that there was no resistance. I think we're all processing this at this point as to what this means. And I think the general feeling is, as long as there's peace in Afghanistan, maybe this isn't the worst thing.
Well, and I understand that you have this shock and this sense of difficulty with hearing this news because, of course, Canadian and American troops spent a lot of time and energy in Afghanistan, yourself included. So what is it like for you to see what's happening there now with the Taliban taking over after you'd put in so much effort training the Afghan army?
There's a full circle of emotions going on right now. There's despair, there's grief, especially when we see scenes that's coming out of Kabul airport at this time. Knowing the future of the Afghans is in jeopardy, the sacrifices of our comrades and our teammates. It's overwhelming for all of us that are a part of this, the small parts of this really big thing. We're just going through different cycles of emotion. Some of this was expected in some elements, that the Afghan army wouldn't stand a really good chance in the long run. But the speed at which the collapse had happened, it's quite difficult to process. And it leaves us with a lot more questions than answers at this time.
And when you say that you sensed that some of this was expected, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, when I left my second deployment in Kabul in 2012, they were still, I guess the international policymakers were still toying with the idea of a 2014 withdrawal date. And my impression was not a good one, that the Afghan forces would be ready at that point. Of course, we know that this was extended up until recently, and I don't know what happened between 2014 and now, but I obviously haven't seen very much changes in the performance of the Afghan National Army and security forces. So it's still rather disappointing, the amount of equipment that went to the Afghan army that's now in the hands of the Taliban. The amount of training, effort that our NATO partners have put into this, to see this really squandered, I think it begs the question, was this a matter of soldiering on behalf of the Afghan soldiers, or was this a leadership problem? I haven't heard anything about the Afghan warlords who had resisted the Taliban in the past. It's what happens to them.
And today we've been hearing a lot from the Taliban. They vowed today to respect women's rights, forgive those who resisted them. But we've also seen that dramatic footage of Afghans attempting to flee the country just yesterday. So from your experience on the ground, what do you anticipate everyday life is going to be like for people there going forward?
Well, to be quite honest, and this is going back to my first deployment in 2008, the Taliban, this wasn't this supernatural force coming in waves across the border from Pakistan. These were local people, especially in Kandahar and where we were in the Panjwai district. It was really hard to get the Afghan local populace to turn against their own family members in support of a government that was largely corrupt, The Afghan army and police had a reputation of sexually abusing young boys. There's a lot of ghost soldiering on paper, a lot of malingerers. A lot of these guys were high in opium, unprepared for patrols when they did come out. So, you know, I really expect that in large swaths of Afghanistan, not much has changed. Even with the NATO presence over the last few years, there's large parts of the country that were under Taliban rule. And from everything that I've studied in Afghanistan, because it didn't end when I left the country. This has always stuck with me. I've always followed up with Afghanistan. I could see, at least through a Taliban's PR perspective, that they were willing to change. And I didn't see that change in our NATO partners' strategy or in the Afghan army. So really, I think for a lot of Afghans, this is not really much of a difference between the Afghan security forces or the Taliban. And if that's the Taliban's commitment to play by international norms because they want recognition, then I know that it's a really hard time right now. This is very fresh and there's a lot of frustration by the current situation. But so long as the Taliban are willing to be good actors, and I think it's going to take some time to centralize themselves, but this is a positive step that I would hope for because this means less bloodshed overall. I'm glad there wasn't a prolonged civil war that ended in a stalemate that just continued to draw more blood for the same conclusion anyways. So maybe I'm just being optimistic.
Right. Well, because I know that there are some people there on the ground who are very skeptical about what might be happening next. But for today, thank you very much for sharing some of your time and expertise with us, David. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
And David Panapinto is an Afghan war veteran joining us from Coburg. Disaster-weary Haitians struggling from that devastating earthquake have been hit by a major storm. A tropical depression drenched the country overnight. While crews search for more victims in the rubble, those who survived the quake are in desperate need of supplies and care. Ellen Morrow has the latest.
This is the airport in Port-au-Prince. It's a bit quiet right now, but throughout the day, it's been a hub of activity as aid organizations try to get aid into the disaster zone. On the edge of the tarmac over there, you can see a Red Cross vehicle. Throughout the day, the most injured, the people who suffered the worst injuries in the disaster zone, some of them have been brought here to Port-au-Prince to be treated in the hospitals here. Now, one of the people who's working here is a Canadian aid worker named Hunter. And Hunter, tell us a little bit about what you've been experiencing throughout the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very hectic. Yesterday we were trying to rush as many patients back to Port-au-Prince. Same thing today. It's just back and forth with the Coast Guard, trying to send as much material as we can, medical equipment.
This is one of the hospitals trying to do its best to treat the injured in the disaster zone. You can see how overwhelmed it is. There are still people who are waiting to get in, waiting to get treatment. You can see this woman right here relying on these people to help her out of a wheelchair to get the treatment that she needs inside. But what we're being told is that this hospital doesn't have all the supplies it needs to help these people who so desperately need care. So where I'm standing now used to be a building. This whole lot was a hotel, and it was destroyed on Saturday. And you can see the pile of rubble there and people trying to take metal and other materials away from the rubble of this hotel.
All houses that you see that fall down, they were bad construction before, at least more or less 25 years ago.
With so much of the affected area, remote villages built on hillsides, no one truly knows just how bad of an impact the earthquake had in this area because so much of it is remote and there are so many layers of difficulties for getting aid to the people who need it the most. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Port-au-Prince.
So sad to see that destruction and devastation, Colette. And so 2 storms through there already, and now we have another named storm. Where are they all headed next?
Yeah, lots of activity that we are seeing. And, you know, it was maybe a slower start to the season, but now things have been heating up. So just having a look at how things are faring, still some rain showers there through Haiti, but things better. However, when you're talking about over 350 millimeters of rain, significant rainfall there. Now we're seeing, and it has strengthened to a tropical storm again, by the way, now we're seeing Grace interacting with Jamaica and then traveling as we move forward in time almost due west, so kind of a west-northwesterly component. So it will be moving towards the Yucatan of Mexico. So this one, we'll see what happens after that. Sometimes these can take a turn, but it is looking like it's actually just going to keep moving in that direction. So they'll be seeing the heavy rains and those very strong winds. But that's not all, because there is also what's happening here close to Bermuda, seeing some of those tropical storm force winds beginning to push up. If you can just kind of see it there on my screen, there's Bermuda. That's Tropical Storm Henry. And then what's this moisture here? Well, still moving stateside. That's, of course, what was Fred, so Tropical Depression Fred, and some of that trying to push up here towards the lower Great Lakes. What we're inheriting, okay, a few spotty showers, but more than that is some of the tropical air and the feel, the stickiness of it. So yesterday our dew points were more around this range of the mid-teens, and then today creeping up into the low 20s, where it becomes much more uncomfortable. Our current temperatures, we're still holding on at 27 degrees, but we're looking at our humidex values in the mid 30s, and we're going to see those starting to come up too, closer to 40 as we get towards the end of the week and into the weekend. Temperatures will also come up as well. So most of this does stay stateside with heavier rains and more active weather into New York and Pennsylvania, but a few of those spotty showers possible overnight tonight. I see more of it really into tomorrow afternoon into southwestern Ontario. I've put a slim chance for us here around the GTA, but you can see as you get towards London region, through Waterloo and through the areas of Kitchener, all the way back towards Windsor, a greater chance of getting some wet weather tomorrow afternoon and some embedded thunderstorms. And then it moves on for Thursday. We'll be seeing that into eastern Ontario with some heavier rains there, but we should start clearing out for the Golden Horseshoe. Tonight, though, not clearing out, keeping that cloud cover, a low of 20 degrees. Quite a bit of clouds tomorrow around as well. The humidex value going up another we're going to see it start nudging up there. Thursday, mostly sunny eventually. May take some time to clear out. And then Friday, there it is, Chris, up to 30 degrees.
Oh my, well, at least we'll be ready.
Yes, we will be prepared.
Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
A man in his 70s suffered life-threatening injuries this afternoon when a vehicle crashed into a bus shelter and the driver fled the scene. It happened at Martin Grove Road and Eglinton Avenue West shortly after 3. The man was rushed to hospital. The driver fled the scene and is still at large, but the vehicle was found abandoned. Police did not provide information about where the vehicle was found. They're asking people in the area to check their dash cameras and get in touch if they captured the accident. To Ottawa now, and a frightening and nearly tragic home invasion has left a girl with significant injuries and a community shaken. The girl jumped from the 3rd floor when an intruder trapped her inside her family's apartment in the downtown. CBC's Nicole Williams has that story.
I feel so upset, so upset.
Zainab Mohammed will never forget the feeling of terror as she helplessly watched a stranger barge into her apartment, close the door, and lock her 12-year-old daughter Sumaya inside with him. Mohammed was out in the hallway at the time. She uses a wheelchair and wasn't able to stop him.
I'm a mother. So many things come to my mind. I wasn't sure my daughter is alive. Right away, I think the guy who killed my daughter, what is going to get, and she's a girl, what is going to do to her?
Inside, Sumaya was alone with the man. He screamed at her, telling her everyone in the building, including her mother, was dead. He was blocking the door, so in an act of desperation, Sumaya ran past him to the balcony and jumped. She survived, but shattered her ankle and broke her leg and back. Doctors expect it will be a year before she fully recovers. As for the man, he was arrested and has been charged.
Mohammed says for years she's witnessed acts of violence, drug deals, and break-ins, all the while trying to make improvements to the building, where there's no air conditioning and the lights in the elevators don't even turn on.
She's developed a homework program for children, started a tenants association, planted flowers out front. But the family doesn't want to go back. They're currently staying in a hotel, hoping to be approved for emergency safety priority, which means they could move into a private rental.
When someone comes into your own home, and this is a child, we're talking about a 12-year-old girl, and terrorizes you in your own home, regardless of what has caused them to do that, it is the most terrifying thing, and you lose all safety.
The fear felt by Mohammed and her daughter has been shared by many in public housing. Each year, Ottawa Community Housing says it receives an average of 30,000 safety calls for its 15,000 units. The organization is investigating whether to install more security cameras, add static or mobile patrols to improve safety. There is no timeline, however, for these changes. But Mohammed says tenants like her and her daughter can't afford to wait for things to get better. They deserve to feel safe where they live. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Ottawa.
All right, as we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX was down 120 points. The Dow went down by 282 points, and the dollar traded lower again today at 79.22 cents US. We'll be right back.
خاطر که بوکس میکنم میخوام باعث پیشرفت شوم باعث پیشرفت افغانستان شوم
چندین سال پیش شما شاید هستین که دختران هم میتونست که بیرون از خانه براین و حال ما میتونم که تمرین بکنم تا المپیک.
That was a scene from the documentary The Boxing Girls of Kabul. The film followed female boxers from Afghanistan who competed at the 2012 Olympics. In light of recent developments in Afghanistan, the CBC spoke with two Canadian filmmakers with ties to the country, including the filmmaker behind The Boxing Girls of Kabul. And arts reporter Yelena Adzik joins us now with more on all of this. So, Yelena, let's start with the Canadian filmmaker of Black Kite. What did he have to say?
Yes. Okay. So, Chris, we're talking about Tariq Kayumi, and he is someone who was born in Afghanistan. He came to Canada, and this was as a refugee as a child, and then went back to work there. And this movie that you mentioned, I'm going to give you a little bit of a look at it right now. Black Kite. This is a movie that premiered at TIFF in Toronto 2017. It's really creatively told with archival footage, but also animation. This is about a young daughter whose father secretly teaches her how to fly a kite during a time when it was outlawed. Now, Kayumi is based now in Vancouver, and he describes what's happening there presently as devastating. The people he worked with are now terrified. Have a listen to what he had to say.
I worked with all these young, energetic, cosmopolitan, talented people who are, the brains in the country right now, in the media industry, and they're all looking to leave right now. I'm writing a lot of letters of reference for them. There's a lot of back and forth on social media platforms and things like that. People are reaching out to me, and everyone's scared.
And he himself was terrified. He says that when he was working there, he was dodging suicide bombings. He was really, really scared for his life or hearing this knock at the door and being taken away. So the struggle, certainly, it was very palpable for him as he just was dogged, just determined to have this storytelling happen, Chris.
For him and for so many others as well. The spotlight is really on Afghanistan right now. And I know that CBC has spoken with another filmmaker. We teased the film off the top, The Boxing Girls of Kabul. Tell us a little bit more about his thoughts around all this.
Yes, so this one is from Ariel Nasser. He is really, really well known for his gritty films, and they often use very natural locations. A lot of times the actors are people living on the ground. Let's take another look at Boxing Girls of Kabul as we talk about the fact that Ariel Nasser, he wanted to tell this true story about young women who were not even allowed to leave the house at one point, and then they went from that to being able to train for the Olympics at boxing competitions. He himself is a father from Afghanistan. His mother is from California, but he's got this love affair for the country. His movies include Buzkashi Boys, which was nominated for an Academy Award. That was in 2013 for Best Live Action Short Film. He also did a documentary called Good Morning Kandahar, and the one that you're seeing here is from the National Film Board. And so his movies talk about women's rights. He also has captured underground radio stations on film. He has tremendous tenacity. He takes a lot of risks. He has shown the secret history of cinema hidden from the Taliban with archival footage smuggled out of the country. So when we ask this now, this filmmaker how he's feeling now, he says stressed, heartbroken, exhausted. He has been spending his time really trying to focus on the people that are being left behind, these young people, and trying to get them out in many ways. Have a listen to him talk about that.
20 years of people really believing in this dream of a new government, seeing its problems, right? Not being uncritical of the international community, but investing in it because it was the best thing that they could do, and seeing all that work, decades of people's lives invested in that, just being reduced to zero, being reduced to rubble, their dreams.
Yeah, so you can hear there that there's clearly an intense frustration, and it's understandable.
And this fight for women's rights is something that a lot of us have been paying attention to, especially today. The Taliban is vowing that they will respect women's rights moving forward now that the country is under their rule. But I'm curious, what do these filmmakers think the future holds for Afghanistan?
Yeah, okay, so let's talk a little bit about the differences, because they both feel that ultimately this is going to come down to the people. This is going to be up to them to decide where things are going to go. I'm going to let you have a listen right now to one of the filmmakers sharing a little bit more about the thoughts on the future.
The only thing we can say is that we don't know who the new Taliban are.
Right.
And I'm not trying to put a positive spin on this, because one of my friends on the internet called me out on that. It's just that the country's also doubled in population. The country's not the old Afghanistan. The country has had a taste of this freedom.
So there's Tarek Kayumi, and as you saw there earlier, that was my colleague Eli Glasner. He conducted that interview, and Eli's got this great piece online, Chris, and he delves more into this. It's a little bit more in depth, but it's incredible when you think of the struggle that these filmmakers have gone through and continue to go through. They're often writing a lot of letters to try and help young filmmakers there right now get out. And he's saying, many are saying that is Canada's gain, because these are some of the best and the brightest when it comes to filmmaking. So if you want to check that out, just simply Google Canadian Afghan filmmakers, and the CBC story from Eli Glasner will be the first one to come up.
Okay, and maybe a longer read with a bit of nuance there, but an important storyline for so many of us to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Thanks for this, Yelena.
You got it, Chris.
Hey, here's some major sports news for you. Cincinnati Reds first baseman and Toronto native Joey Votto scored his 2,000th career hit last night, making him the second Canadian in history to do so.
Payoff. 2,000 hits for Joey Votto.
The crowd went wild, but he just kind of sauntered over there. That was the iconic MLB moment for Votto, who helped the Reds win 14-5 over the Chicago Cubs. Larry Walker from Maple Ridge, British Columbia, was the first Canadian to accomplish this rare feat. He made his 2,000th career hit for the Colorado Rockies back in 2004. Now, for Votto, he is also the second player in the MLB history to make 300 home runs, 1,000 RBIs, and 2,000 hits, all in a single season. Congratulations to him. And finally, have you ever heard of a robot doing a backflip? It looks pretty dynamite to me. No Hollywood special effects there. This is a fully functioning humanoid robot designed by Boston Dynamics. Atlas, as it's called, is 5 feet tall and weighs 86 kilos. Oof, that is heavy. This parkour routine is not just for showing off. Balancing, leaping over obstacles, and yes, even backflips are a way to test and push its abilities. And much like humans, this is a result of a decade filled with trial and error and falling flat on its face. The team says robots crash a lot, but are programmed to get back up and keep practicing. And it's all about putting one mechanical foot in front of the other and carrying on. Who knew that story would be filled with such a important life lesson? Hey, Colette?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you've seen some of the videos. They actually put the robots together and they choreograph a dance for them all to do.
It's very cool.
It is very cool. So, I mean, the future is now, folks. You know, we talked about the tropics a bit earlier, and I was kind of giving you an update there. I also want to talk about our neighbors to the west and what's happening in British Columbia because, you know, a token of some positive news weather-wise there. You can see some of the temperatures closer to the coastline are actually a little above seasonal, but look at the cooler numbers that we're seeing into the interior. And what is the reason for that? Well, how about some significant rain that's been falling there in areas that so desperately need it, so dry and with the wildfire situation. So yes, some lightning strikes in there too. That's what those blue things are, but seeing a lot of improvement in terms of being able to get some moisture coming back in there. Now, this is some of that moisture I was talking about in our neighborhood, right? With a few isolated showers potential tonight, but really into tomorrow afternoon, we'll have a slight chance of it too. It shouldn't be much. There won't be much to it. A little more significant into southwestern Ontario. Tonight, 20 degrees, mostly cloudy skies. Tomorrow, up to 28 degrees. It's that humidex that's coming on up, though, Chris. We're going to see that, and the temperature heading up. Temperature towards 30, humidex towards 40 as we move forward this week.
All right, now do it again with a backflip.
No, we'll choreograph a dance. Let's work on that.
We'll leave that to the robots. Thanks, Colette.
Please. You're welcome.
And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Kelda Yoon has your next local newscast tonight at 11, right after the National. And I will see you back here tomorrow night at 6. Have a great night.